This widespread shortage that's affecting millions of people around the world right now must actually be extremely widespread because it's affecting me in a very small town in rural North Dakota right now. Hey everybody, it's Magic Prepper, and on October 28th, the FDA announced that there was a shortage of amoxicillin, specifically the powdered form. Well, I recently took my kids to the doctor, and it turns out they all had strep throat. So in order to get rid of it, they needed antibiotics. So the doctor prescribed them amoxicillin. When I went to the pharmacy, the pharmacist informed me that amoxicillin was indeed in short supply, and they were going to have to substitute that prescription for azithromycin, which is not amoxicillin. But this should tell you just how widespread this shortage actually is. It's affecting me here in a small town in North Dakota of only 2,000 people, which means it must be affecting a lot of people in all other parts of the country, as well as in all other countries. So let's talk about this shortage for a second and give you some ideas about alternatives or what you can do about it and why this might be a bigger deal moving into the future here. And if you're worried about preparing for the idea of shortages regarding important medicines that keep people alive, then hit the subscribe button below because I'll do my best to inform you about this stuff when it's relevant and actually happening. Now, Jace Medical is one of my affiliates. I have links to them below in the description as well as a pinned comment, and they're linked in almost every video, but it's basically a company that provides you a prescription for antibiotics. They sent out a newsletter that basically informed me that this was happening and that the FDA was maybe inaccurate on the reporting of it only affecting the powdered form of amoxicillin. The American Society of Healthcare Pharmacists maintains a database of drug shortages, and they're saying that all forms of amoxicillin are affected. It's not just the powdered form. And the FDA states that only the powdered form has a shortage because as long as one manufacturer can actually put out the liquid form or the chewable form or any of the other forms, then they're considering it not being in a shortage in that form. But that should tell you that all it takes is one more manufacturer to fall to the wayside for us to suddenly experience that shortage as well. Okay? So there's no perceived shortage in those departments according to the FDA, but what the American Society of Healthcare Pharmacists is saying is that it is indeed in shortage in all forms, no matter how you want to look at it, okay? Now, this is something you really need to consider because this is a big deal, but there's a lot of turmoil going on in the planet right now. We all know what's happening around the world in the sense of conflict and everything else of that nature. Well, here's something you got to keep in mind, okay? Look, everything is being blamed on the supply chain and logistics and everything that happened during the crisis of 2020 as to why this amoxicillin shortage is occurring. But here's a data point for you to keep in mind when you're working on your preps and you're worried about some of the things, some of the existential threats that are coming at us from other parts of the world, okay? In 2008, all right, so 14 years ago, every single dose of amoxicillin administered in the United States was produced in the United States. All right. Now, by 2019, 80% of all amoxicillin was made in China that was administered here in the United States. So this should tell you just how much of a stranglehold China is really holding on the APIs in the pharmaceutical market. And the fact is, if something happens with China, we will be very hard pressed to come up with enough supply for the demand of antibiotics here within the United States. And this is why you need to prepare for this. It's not just preparing for full-on apocalyptic events where you might have to treat an infected wound with the antibiotics that you kept by your bedside just in case. This is also for the actual inability to acquire it just because of trade embargoes and supply chain issues regarding conflict, which is becoming more and more likely every single day. And when one country controls so much of the pharmaceutical industry, they basically have a monopoly on whether or not you'll get the treatment you need during that type of situation, okay? So I wanted to bring that to your attention to let you know that there's probably more to this story than just supply chain issues, all right? Now, some alternatives in the sense of antibiotics and where you can get them are other types of antibiotics that treat similar symptoms as to what amoxicillin will treat, aka infections, especially ones that are in the upper respiratory nature of being sick, right? Because that's something that everybody deals with almost every single winter. Well, you do have the ability to, of course, get your standard antibiotics prescribed by your doctor. You also have Jace Medical, who will then give you a prescription and send you a Jace case, which basically gives you an assortment of different antibiotics, which then gives you the ability to treat different types of ailments and infections depending on what they are. But another alternative route is that if you need to get amoxicillin, and I don't know if you can find it right now, but I do know that your pets might need it as well. And if your pets need amoxicillin, especially your fish in your fish tank, then there's ways to get pet grade amoxicillin for your fish, and specifically only for your fish, from certain companies that sell pet supplies like Walmart Pets and Petco and companies like that. So basically, like for us humans, we have the options of going to the doctor or using Jace Medical. And then for any of our very important fish within our households that we prepare for in order to keep our fish alive during the apocalypse, we have the ability to go to some of those pet goods distributors. So those are alternative ways to get these different types of medicines that are in very short supply right now. And that's why you should be stocking up on them when you can, because nobody will necessarily know the day when no amoxicillin exists any longer. Now, there are alternatives to amoxicillin. Like I said, my kid's doctor prescribed azithromycin instead of amoxicillin in order to combat the strep throat, right? Well, you can also look at different antibiotics like doxycycline, cephalexin, and Jace even said in their newsletter that if their amoxicillin supplies run short and they have to substitute it, that they'll use augmentin, which is a different form of amoxicillin, but might not be affected by the same shortages right this second. So these are all things to consider, but I wanted to bring this to your attention because this literally happened to me just now. I literally went to the doctor, got a prescription, and it couldn't be filled with the exact medication that was being required. So this is something I wanted to bring to your attention to let you know that this shortage is real and it's affecting me directly in a very small part of the country. So be aware of this, prepare for it ahead of time, understand the monopoly that China has on pharmaceuticals, and that's going to be it for Magic Prepper.